Welcome to Authentic Educators, a podcast by teachers for teachers about best lessons, favorite classroom moments, and strategies you can implement today. Teachers, no matter the grade or subject, want their students to be active thinkers. A classroom that fosters dynamic discussion will result in better learning outcomes than a static and stale one. My friend and colleague, Cawley, utilizes a daily routine in her 7th grade math class that I have been impressed with throughout the school year. She doesn't use traditional seating charts. Instead, daily randomized seats give students a new perspective and new partners every day of the year. She leans into vertical whiteboards so students can display their thinking and learn from the thinking of their peers. Her choice to place student-curated playlists creates a comforting environment where students' thinking does not draw undue attention to any individual. Dave and I loved learning from Joanne's 29 years in the classroom. We hope you do too. So I'm really excited today to talk to my across the hall teaching neighbor, Joanne Cawley. There's some things that we're going to talk about in this episode that she's inspired me to do in my classroom for the first time in 18 years that are all very simple, straightforward concepts that have very, very powerful impacts on student learning. I can say that with certainty because I have the pleasure of watching her teach and interacting with students, and I know there's wonderful stuff happening in her classroom. So Joanne, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And
I feel honored that you guys asked me to do this. This is my first time ever on a podcast. I've listened to a bunch of them, but never been interviewed. So I feel honored. So thanks,
wonderful.
guys. Yeah.
And you're our final guest of the season. Next week is just going to be me and Dave recapping. So this is the penultimate episode of season 1.
Oh, wow. Wow. Now I feel nervous.
No need to
you
feel
should
nervous.
be. No, I'm just kidding.
So I guess maybe I'd like to jump off, Joanne, is the thing that I do in class now that comes directly from you, which I don't know. Do you remember? Maybe I started it in December or January. I don't remember what date it was, but it's the whole concept of having students without seating charts, which to a teacher listening to the episode, you might say, what? But I'm never going back. So can you let the audience know, where you discovered that, how it works, and what you've seen in your longer time utilizing the strategy than I have?
Yeah, sure. Cody and I both work in the Upper Dublin School District, and I believe it was summer of 21. Don't quote me on it, but I believe it was summer 21. The math department said, hey, here's a great book we want you guys to read. There's really great strategies in there to really engage the children in thinking. And it's very much teacher is kind of the facilitator, and the students are doing all the heavy lifting. And that's who should be doing the heavy lifting. We want them to become the critical thinkers. We want them to make decisions for themselves. And that's what this is all about. So the Building Thinking Classroom, that's what the book is called. That's the one that was suggested that we read. And it's a very easy read. There's really nice, quick cliff notes for those people who know what those are. Just here's what you can implement tomorrow in your room, or they're called micro moves or macro moves. And so I just dabbled with giving them brand new seats every single day. And like everything, there's a million things online. That's why they call it Google, right? So I just use a very teacher-friendly website called, I believe it's called classtools.net. Mm-hmm. And you put your students' names in there in September. And every day I come in and I just hit go. And honestly, the beginning of the school year, I let the kids do it. And they sit where they sit. And I can manage anything for 55 minutes. I tell them the same. I said, you guys can manage yourself. You might be sitting with your best friend for 55 minutes or someone you don't even know for 55 minutes. And then you have an opportunity to make more friends. Of course, we're still dealing with effects from COVID, and that was one of them. So, I'm still finding ways to help the kids make friends. So that's one of the reasons why that came to be. Just trying to get them to talk more to each other without the masks on, and people trying to make more friends because they were so sheltered for so long in their own homes, or however the parents wanted to handle that. So that was an idea in the Building Thinking Classroom, and then I ran with it. And the website I use has color-coded groups. So then I had color-coded Squares, groups 1 through 9, one on the corner of a desk on the same color construction paper that matched the one up on the board that the kids would see. So it would help the kids see where to go because it was the same color up there as it was on the desk. But teaching 7th grade for 29 years, I should say 24 years, but in the profession for 29 years, you know, they pick at stuff constantly, right? We got fidget toys. Well, that was their fidget toy on the desk. I'm like, this is not working. So I got rid of all the numbers, and because I teach math, I have numbers hanging above all the desks. And inside all the numbers are the multiples of that number. So the group 5 has a 5 above it, and the multiples are 5 are in there. So, you know, they're very much in tune to where to go. They come in, they look at the big board, and they go and sit. And again, back in September, I let them do it. You know, it's a little nervous for them. They don't know who they're going to sit with, or are they going to sit with a friend? Are they going to sit with somebody they don't know? And then they do get accustomed to it. But then as the year progresses and as conflicts take place, I'm kind of seeing who is sitting where. You know, you have to separate this person from that person. And that's just the nature of middle school. It's the nature of teaching. And those friendships evolve, they dissipate, they become very strong, and anywhere in between, right? That's a tough thing about middle school and the friendships that are made and broken. So I really feel strongly that a lot of people should get on board with this. But again, it gets nervous for us too. It's nervous for the kids to do something new. It's nervous for us to do something new. But then it becomes very natural. And so I do that as a springboard into vertical workspaces. So we have the pleasure of being in a beautiful new building. I believe this is only the third year that we have this, and I have lots of whiteboard spaces around the room. And back to the building thinking classroom, there's been a lot of research done by that particular author that the kids actually, their brains work better if they're standing up and writing. And so,
and that's not just math. I mean, the book itself is math, but applicable to really any subject, correct?
Absolutely. And I believe he's made other books for other disciplines. Don't quote me on that, but it's a quick Google. In the back of every one of those chapters as well, it breaks it down into different grade levels. So, and they're just non-curricular tasks. They don't have to be math at all. And you can implement them tomorrow. It's just to get the kids talking and thinking. And that's what we want. We want good critical thinkers in America. We want them, you know, they're our future, literally. So we want them to be able to make good decisions based on the facts and go. And that's what we do. So, you know, I project the problems up at the board. We use illustrative math. And I project the problems up at the board. They also have it in a packet or a book at their desk. And I have them go up, and they have certain roles based on how the randomizer shows. So if it's Cody, Joanne, and Dave, Cody being the first person, that's the leader for that group for the day.
And that's
Joanne is the second person.
Right.
Joanne is the writer just for that particular day. Dave is what I call the advice seeker. So when the students get stumped on a problem, they can go and travel around to the other groups and seek advice. And really, you know, working collaboratively is what we all do when we're grown-ups.
Yeah.
So that's what we need them to do in the classroom. So I've definitely evolved from, you know, we used to be in rows, and no more rows. It's all desks pushed together. They can be changed into different configurations. Because look, we're working together right now.
Right.
You guys work together all the time to make podcasts. Cody and I work together every day with our team. So there's very, very few jobs that you work alone. So that's also where this idea of having all the groups working collaboratively every single day. So when they go up to their board space, like I said, I'm sorry, go ahead.
A follow-up question. So, right, they come in, they see they're in desk 1, desk 2, or seat group 1, group 2. How quickly, and I'm sure it varies every day, but how long are they in their seats before they're up at the assigned, you know, section 1 whiteboard?
Yeah, it definitely varies.
Okay.
I mean,
so it's not like this consistent thing for you?
No, sometimes it's like, okay, boom, 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 boom. We're all here. I take attendance, going up to your whiteboards. And, you know, the way our lessons are configured is the warm up, and then basically 2 activities, and then a cool down. And a cool down is back at your seats by yourself. So, you know, that's something I'm kind of toying with maybe changing that up. Maybe those cool downs should be a group activity, because really I want to know, did they get out of the lesson what I wanted them to get out of the lesson? So when you're working with the groups the whole entire lesson, and then you're like, oh, okay, now you're on your own. I don't know.
Right.
Should I make it more of a group thing? But groups are always tricky. Like, does everyone pull their weight? Like you get into that whole idea of, do you need a rubric for, one little cool down to see if they know the topic or the content from, what you were trying to get them to teach. So back to what I do, I put the problems up at the whiteboard, and I just make sure they understand the problem. Sometimes there's vocabulary they don't know. Sometimes it's a situation they don't know. So we have to talk through that. And then I'm like, okay, have at it. So then that's where they're up at their board space. Somebody's got the marker. They try to start hashing out, what do I do? And then the beautiful thing about math is there's lots of different ways to answer a question. So it's beautiful when they get everything up and it's very visual. Everybody can look around the room, and, it's my job to then put it in sequential order. Like, okay, I want people to look at 6 first because they're showing something, and then 8 built on what 6 did. And then finally, the best version is what group 2 did. And so, we're standing, we're analyzing what everybody wrote on the board. And it's fantastic. And I just kind of sit back. I let them do it. If I see that they're doing math wrong, of course I jump right in, because I don't want them to go down the wrong path. I don't want them to establish bad habits. So I jump in there, but honestly, I don't have to do that a whole lot. Usually somebody in the group is like, wait a second, Dave, I don't think that looks right. I think maybe we copied something down wrong, or a calculation was wrong, or maybe you punched something into the calculator incorrectly. So that's pretty powerful when I can sit back and all the discourse is happening, the conversation is happening out here, and I'm just kind of validating what they're doing. That's very powerful. I mean, think about it in your own lives. When you're like coming up with the solutions and you get validation, you're like, all right, I did that by myself.
Immediate validation where it's visible to the whole class, right?
Absolutely.
Everybody in the class can look over and, dare I say, admire the math in group 3 for the moment.
No, it is true, right? And then again, since it's so visible, maybe if you have somebody who's a little meek, who's the advice seeker, maybe they're just going to want to look at board 1. Maybe they don't want to approach them. And so they'll say, "Oh, I like what they did on group 1. Can we try it that way?" It's great. It really is. And you got to establish those things in September, though. It's hard.
Like, you can't just, hey, it's March, let's go up to the board, because they're kids and they're going to be squirrely and distract each other. But if it becomes part of routine,
yes,
right? I imagine the discipline issues, while not non-existent, have to be smaller, correct?
Yeah, agreed.
Joanne, you mentioned, obviously you said the term vertical whiteboards. This may be a silly question. So do you have multiple like floor to ceiling whiteboards in your room? Is that the setup or what?
Do you want me to show you?
I mean, yeah, why not?
What I have?
Yeah.
Okay. So just to my left, you're right. Do you see, it's like your old quote unquote chalkboard.
Yeah.
But then I see the numbers up top.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's 3, 4, 5, 6. And then going around the rooms, actually, I have 9 groups in one class. 9 is way over there. 7, 8, 1, and 2. So can you see that okay?
Yeah, decent enough. So you have like 2 groups per whiteboard in the back that you just showed us, and was it 4 in the front maybe?
Yeah. And sometimes that can get way too busy. So as we're peeling back like the layers of what they do, I'll say, okay, my leaders stay up at the board. Everybody else go take a seat. Because then it's hard to have 24 people around the room trying to look between people and such. So, and I just kind of pick that up, because I just pick which one. Usually the writer is doing the heavy lifting, like literally writing it. So I usually don't pick the writer to stay up there, because I want the leader to make sure, like, just because that person might be taken over as the writer, I still need to know what's going on. I need to pull those other people in as the leader to make sure they're understanding what they're doing.
Right.
And then that advice seeker, like I described, they can roam all around. I pretty much stand in the middle of the room, and I was on I guess, well, it was really a meeting. It wasn't a podcast with the author of the book. And he said, you have to figure out what you want to be. Do you want to be the middle of the bike and the spokes? Those are the paths that the kids are taking to you. Or do you want to go to them? And so I decided I wanted to be the one in the middle.
Yeah,
And I wanted them to have to come to me. But again, they're not really supposed to be coming to me. They're supposed to be going to get advice from the other people around the room.
Now, the third thing that you had mentioned as we were discussing this episode, which is also extraordinarily simple to implement, is the idea of the background music.
Yeah.
Can you talk to our listeners about why you do it and the benefit that you see in it?
Sure. Like we all do as teachers, we try to get to know our students in September. So one of the things I ask them is what their favorite song is. And I do tell them I'm going to build a Spotify playlist off of their songs. So some say, I don't know, I don't have a favorite. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to throw one of my favorites in. So then I get to enjoy some of the music. I do know some of their music at this point, but they all like rap, and I'm like, it's got to be clean. I go through that whole conversation. And so it's so incredibly simple, but so incredibly powerful, because especially when I teach the higher grades, I'm sorry, the higher math, the highest I go is Algebra 1. A lot of them don't want to talk. They don't want to be heard wrong. They have been very good with math for a very long time. So sometimes they have a very difficult time saying things, because it's bringing them out of their comfort zone. Because what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? So I've just been noticing, and it's quite a little experiment, that if I don't put any music on, and again, it's their own playlist, they won't really discuss too much. Once I go up to the board, I hit the Spotify link and have their music going, all of a sudden the conversation starts. Because really, the only people that are going to hear you are like the other two that you're at the board space with, or if they're doing some work in the seats, like we have to do a lot of graphing. It's sometimes just easier for them to do it at their desks instead of dragging out like the big Post-it graph paper. It's kind of awkward on the vertical board space, but they're more apt to talk, which is just so easy to do and easy to implement. They love hearing their own songs. And when they hear one, they're like, whose song is that? Whose song is that? And I'm like, hey, if you want to tell everybody whose song it is, go for it. It's kind of, whatever. It's been between you and me, because some of the kids have some very interesting tastes. Like maybe they have the taste of their parents' music, which isn't necessarily rap. So it's interesting, but it's wild to just see it happen.
Music's just such a good connector though, too, I feel like, because some people might like lyrically what's going on, or they might like a certain genre. And I've always identify with, as we were talking about before here, that music's just such an easy way into connecting with kids, because I don't know, kind of crosses all the psychographic things you could label somebody as, that's plenty of people like music, and I do love that. And it fills the buzz, like if there's no noise. I mean, that sometimes kind of allows for more noise to be generated, I guess.
It's such an interesting thing, because, in talking to Joanne about her teaching practices, pretty much, so I'm 39. Anybody who's my age, maybe a little bit younger, or certainly older, never really learned math this way. It was, my memory of some really amazing math teachers from my secondary education, like my calc teacher, who I admired. She went over and explained and did a couple, and then she let us do those things. And so this concept of the math that's happening in our school, and I imagine many other schools across the country, it's having the kids grapple with it before you show them. Obviously, you're going to triage whatever you need to triage. Joanne, I think you said earlier, not so that they build up bad math habits, but it's such a powerful thing to see in person, which I have the privilege of doing. And for listeners, obviously any math listeners out there, right? It's right up your alley. But I'm an ELA teacher, and I don't think the random seating works every day. The vertical whiteboards is a little bit more challenging, but whenever I've had the opportunity to, I've definitely tapped. Dave, as a business teacher, I am mad, like I can't quite come up with something off the top of my head, but do you see any, and you're in high school, right? Joanne and I are current 7th grade teachers. Dave, how would you anticipate like a student reaction to either the randomized seating or the vertical whiteboards?
I'll start with the seats. I mean, I think with the seats, I guess it really depends on the class. Like I have mixed groups, so I have every academic ability and every grade, which can lead to really fun classes, or it can, lead to border awkward situations just because, when you have a homogenous group, all sophomores together, all juniors together, and they're all tracked the same way. I don't know that the kids tend to maybe at times relate more. So sometimes I feel that as something interesting, like, maybe like a resistance to kids chatting as much as I'm used to. I don't know. I think kids would be open to it though. I like to do like things like concentric circles to start the year, which is a lot of movement, and generally I try to do as much movement as possible. So I guess what I would say is it's all about culture. I guess like if it is awkward, you can keep at it and the persistence will end up breaking that tension. Whereas if you don't do it at all, what you're left with is what you start with, which is a class that doesn't want to talk to each other. So I'd rather put in the
Yeah.
effort and get some results than nothing. So yeah, I could see that being maybe some work every day because high school kids, there's some that, they come in and they're ready to just do their thing. But I think that could definitely work with some groups. And as far as the vertical whiteboards, I mean, so from my understanding, the whole concept is essentially you have groups working on a problem together and they're hashing it out on the whiteboard. And at its essence, it's that, correct, Joanne?
Yes. Yeah. You got it.
I mean, I don't see why that couldn't work on with a business class. Like today, for example, my students delivered elevator pitches for businesses they're doing in my
I love it.
yeah, in my entrepreneurship class. When we were
Yes.
done with that, we were transitioning to writing mission statements for our business, and I kind
No,
of
you could put them up on the board,
transitioned
right?
from that.
Totally.
What was that? Sorry.
You just put the mission statement on the board, right?
Well,
Like,
yeah, and
that
I was
could be
going to say like something I did today that I modeled live, but I could have then had everybody up and writing. I had one kid's mission statement that he submitted on our learning management system on Canvas, and I read it out loud to the class, and I suggested some feedback because he wrote something. His statement was something on the lines like he led with something his business was against, and then he's followed up with what they're for. And I said, just remove what you're against and just make your mission statement, this is what we're for. And you can still be against that thing, but lead with this sort of positive tone. And that was something I modeled live, but I could have ended up maybe having kids go work together, collaborate, and write them on the board. And everybody could be crisscrossing words out and subbing one word for a more powerful one. And it was a lesson in being concise and leading with like your purpose. But that, without a doubt, is one example. I think I could easily come up with a bunch of other ones. I mean, I do that sometimes with word splashes for brainstorming. Like if I introduce in personal finance a unit on when we get into like talking about the stock market, that day, normally I'll just give every single kid in the room a marker and they go and they write. I say, write one word that comes to mind or one phrase that comes to mind when you think of either the word stock or investing. And, kids will write things like buy and hold, S&P 500, index fund. And
Good
then,
for them.
yeah, and it leads to like a conversation.
high school, remember, Joanne? High school.
Yes. Oh, yes. That's impressive, though.
But that's a quick one-off thing where, look, I'm a huge fan of getting kids out of their seat as much as possible, especially here because we have block schedule. They're 83-minute classes. I can't sit still for that long. So I do think in reflecting and talking to you, Joanne, something that like the beauty of doing this podcast and talking to people is it always makes me think about my practice. And so I'm sitting here listening to, and what I'm thinking about is like, I've got these whiteboards, one in the front, one in the back of the room. Like, yeah, I got to be using them more because it is a pretty easy way to take anything they're doing in a notebook and you can throw it on the board and it then can lead to more natural conversations. And to chime in something I wanted to say earlier that I love that you're doing where you have the groups together, it can be really hard to talk publicly in front of 30 people or however many people in a room. But when it's only 3 people, the threat of failure is way less severe. As a matter of fact, it's not really a threat because you're in it together just wondering. And then when you say something and your small group celebrates your success, then it's a lot easier to share in front of the larger group. And so I just think as a practice, whether it's standing in front of the group or not, that's the beauty of working in a small group is you get to validate, as I think you guys said earlier, you get to validate your thoughts. And actually, if you never do share it with the group, that's okay because you still got to share it, which if you don't have anybody doing anything with a group and only one or two kids are raising their hands all the time, then they're the only people getting the validation. So even if you, the teacher, don't get to give them public praise, they might be getting it from their peers, which some kids probably want it from their peers more than they want it from us anyway.
Absolutely.
So I really
I
love
agree.
just the takeaway of kids working in groups and collaborating and like we are right now. It's so important for kids.
So Joanne, thank you so much for joining us. Before we close out, any kind of final words or thoughts for listeners out there? I thought you did a great job, talking
Thank
about
you.
the
Well,
seats and the whiteboards and the music and how they all interplay with each other.
yeah, I mean, give it a shot, you know? That's just gonna make us grow as professionals. So it might feel a little uncomfortable at first, but it'll the magic happens,
Yeah.
Somebody said a long time ago, it might even be a famous phrase, magic happens outside of your comfort zone. And that's what happened. When I first was diving into this, I'm like, "Oh boy, what is this gonna do? Is it gonna be a big failure? In which case, okay, I'm gonna learn from it, or it's gonna be a success." And you might talk to some of my students, they might hate it.
No,
But I'm not.
I've had a lot of students in my final rounds of conferencing where they, without being prompted to explicitly bring up I love that if I end up sitting next to somebody that I can't stand as the negative, I only do it for a day / they said that they're excited every day because they might get to sit next to their best friend.
Yeah.
So it creates that differentiation, that spontaneity that I think at least the students that you and I share currently really appreciate for the most part. I'm sure it's not
Cool.
100%.
Yeah, right. They're 12, they're 13. We're never gonna make all of them happy. That's
Correct.
for sure.
So thank you so much for joining Dave and me on Authentic Educators, a podcast
Thank
for
you.
teachers by teachers about best lessons, favorite classroom moments, and strategies you can use today. Tune in next episode for our final episode of the season, where Dave and I are going to discuss what we've learned along this journey. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. Bye-bye.
All right. Continued success, guys.
Thank you again, Joanne.
You're welcome. It was so great to meet you, Dave, and Cody. I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. See y'all later. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to our conversation. As always, reach out to us at AuthenticEdPod@gmail.com if you have any questions or great ideas you'd like to share. If you enjoy what we are doing, the best way you can help is to subscribe to, rate, and share our podcast. Our goal is to reach and help as many educators as possible, and that cannot happen without folks spreading the word. We appreciate your support, and thank you again for listening to Authentic Educators.